Welcome to Inclusion Unlocked, where we explore the changing equity, diversity and inclusion landscape, bringing you fresh perspectives, lived experiences, practical tips and next practice. I'm Sasha Scott, I'm the founder and CEO of the Inclusive Group. We're an equity, diversity and inclusion consultancy in the business of behaviour. Alongside our guests, we'll be exploring challenging topics and focusing on action, considering the practical steps each of us can take, whether we're leaders, HR practitioners or colleagues, to unlock inclusion in our workplace. Today, I'm joined by the C-suite diversity leader, lawyer, media commentator and author, the formidable Funke Abimbola. Funke shares insights into her early career and how the murder of George Floyd acted as a catalyst for a career change into DEI. We discuss Funke's deep sense of pride around her Nigerian heritage and the highs and lows, but mostly the highs, of working alongside her incredible son Max during the pandemic. We also get a sneak peek of what to expect from her forthcoming book, Climbing Mountains. I've been a really enthusiastic follower of Funke for a number of years, and if you're looking for a dose of inspiration from a leader who's been long advocating and driving progress on DEI, this episode is just for you. Okay, well, hello, and so excited to be here today. Funke, thank you so much for joining us on Inclusion Unlocked as our guest. I've been really wanting to talk and, more importantly, listen to you for a very long time. So I feel incredibly privileged that you're giving us your time this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, Sasha. Thank you.
My pleasure. So I'm going to dive straight in. You started your working life as a corporate lawyer, and I know that while there's still a way to go, the legal sector's come a very long way when it comes to both inclusion and culture. And I'd love to get a sense of your early career experiences, how that shaped, who you are and the work that you do today.
Yes, no, thank you for that, Sasha. So, yes, it was indeed the challenges I faced entering the solicitor's profession that really spurred me on later on to start focusing on diversity and equity across the profession. I experienced very blatant and obvious name discrimination on trying to enter the profession. I was told by recruiters that that was what was happening. Recruitment consultants were telling me that. They were saying that I should think about other practice areas outside of corporate law, that, corporate law was not was too competitive for a black woman. These are the sorts of things I was being told at the time. Very upsetting. I went through a full cycle of feeling a huge sense of despair at various stages as I was sending off CVs and covering letters, and I ended up having to do a cold calling campaign. I made over 150 phone calls over a period of 2 weeks to all the partners that were heading up corporate law practices at the top law firms. And I did the same with the in-house side. So it was 50 in-house heads of legal and general counsels. It was 100 heads of corporate practices. And that was what actually got my foot in the door. That way I was able to get my interviews and ultimately, was able to qualify. So I was really upset about that. Fast forward a few more years, settled into the legal profession. I was about 2 years qualified, was married, decided to have a baby. Not unusual when you're married for that to be
No,
the case at all. And
absolutely.
at the time, and we're going back almost 25 years, the profession just wasn't really willing in any way, shape, or form to accommodate any form of career breaks. So, maternity leave tends to be one of the most common, but, anyone who'd been
Mm.
absent for a while wanting to go back in and returning from a year's maternity leave, it was like I'd returned to a former, foreign land. I mean, it was, I suddenly was very aware that I was the only female solicitor who'd had a child at that point in their career, and everyone else was waiting very strategically to become a partner before. So now my son's, a year from graduating, and most of my peers still have children, about to enter secondary school. I mean, that's how I know that there really was this
Mm.
gap and this delay. So again, that was a massive hurdle to overcome. I ended up having to leave central London to move to a regional practice as a way of keeping my career going, because it was impossible to go back into the central London practice I was working at and to keep my career going that way. And again, the rage, the despair, that, how unfair all this is. And it was literally, Sasha just complaining about it one day to a group of colleagues at work once I joined a regional practice and still working
Mm.
full time. Me not working full time was never accepted as a corporate lawyer, that I'd have to work the 5 days. It was just to have manageable hours that was the issue. And I started a
Mm.
mentoring group because I was just so angry. And that's how the work then built up slowly over the years, the point where I was then partnering with the Law Society, law firms, and it grew and grew and grew to, working with central government and the Ministry of Justice and all sorts of things. But it,
Amazing.
it started off with a mentoring circle because I was so frustrated with what I was seeing and hearing and experiencing.
Gosh, that's an incredible story, and it's all been motivated by, just hitting barriers and biases, and that I can hear that anger has just fueled all of those really, really significant steps that you had to take just to be in the room and to be noticed. I cannot imagine how hard it must have been to be picking up the phone, cold calling. I mean, and to get someone who was going to listen as well.
Yes, it was tough because this is going back to, well, it was 1999 because I was admitted in 2000, and the internet wasn't what it is now. So actually
No.
getting the phone numbers, you couldn't find out the direct dials, for example, of key decision makers. So I was going through reception to get hold of these
Wow.
individuals. And it was an interesting 2 weeks, Sasha. And
Oh,
it was a sheer sense of
amazing.
desperation, though, because, nothing else was working. And I had to find a way forward. And I ended up meeting up, for coffees with quite a few senior partners, several of whom still remember, in fact, all of them still remember me because how many people were doing this at the time. But yes, it was tough. It was very, very difficult.
Incredibly difficult. And something I notice a lot in listening and talking to people in law firms, because we work with a lot of law firms, probably about 45, 46 law firms over the last 20 years, is I always hear about a really significant bias that seems to exist around corporate. And being a woman in corporate, and certainly being a woman with a child in corporate, whereas other practices have appeared, maybe it's notionally, more inclusive of working in a flexible way. And I mean, I think therefore that there's such a resistance in corporate because it's so transactional and so client faced to welcoming any type of diversity of way in which one works, or balance. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, I mean, corporate is tough just because of the way the work comes in. It tends to be transactional, large corporate deals, etc. And my saving grace actually with moving to a regional firm was that the client base was different. So I was acting less for large multinational organizations at that point, and it was more sort of local owner managed businesses, often of significant size, who themselves had families. It seemed a lot more real, actually. They wanted to have a bit more balance themselves quite often. So I was still
Mm,
enjoying the breadth of the corporate work and helping them to merge and, acquisitions and all the work that I really enjoyed doing. But it was a much kinder client base, frankly. And it's actually very difficult to manage expectations of large multinational client. The pressures often are very real. Often they're tax driven. The structures of these deals are very much tax driven. When you know you're going to be able to make use of a tax loss or some tax form of tax relief, there's often a very hard deadline within which the transaction has to complete. I remember that vividly. So there was no
yeah.
there was no slippage in that, which
Mm,
meant then you then had to work through the night to get the deal through. So depending on which spectrum you're on around that sort of corporate work, there's often no getting around that. But my point is that quite often that's not the case. There's a much wider corporate
mm,
client base we can represent as corporate lawyers. And managing client expectation, it wasn't something I saw being done terribly well when I was a junior solicitor. I think partners are very afraid of losing clients and all of that. And
yeah.
actually, if you manage expectations better, it was actually a lot harder, a lot easier for everybody,
Mm,
including the
mm,
clients, frankly.
mm. And that's really good practical advice as well to people, because I think there are probably a lot of women that are really worried about, you know, maintaining their practice and embracing motherhood. I've heard a lot about a lot more recently around freezing eggs and just suspending life, and you know, trying to have it all. So this is an evolution, right? And throughout your corporate career, you've played very much a leading role, as we hear, around mentoring, but a lot more than that, I think, in advocating for diversity and supporting diverse talent. And in recognition for that work, absolutely incredible, brilliant achievement. You're awarded an MBE in 2017.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I wanted to move it as well in terms of, after the murder of George Floyd, you then set up a diversity consultancy. Can you tell us more about that period and that journey that you've been on since then?
Yes, so at the time I was on study leave, actually, and that hadn't been. It just happened to coincide with lockdown. I'd planned the study leave well ahead of lockdown, even knowing that any such thing would exist. You know, we didn't know, did we?
Mm,
Um, and so I was in a full-time job, you know, still practicing law, etc. And when George Floyd was murdered, and at the time my son, of course, had been sent home from school, so he was in sixth form. You know, there was no school; it was all online. Everyone reached out to me because at this stage I was so well known, for the work, the impact I'd had, you know, very actionable things I was doing, making, you know, driving very tangible change, promoting action plans and helping people around what they could tangibly do to drive that change. So I had people reaching out not only from my legal network, but also from global pharmaceuticals, because I'd worked within global pharma for the best part of the decade at that stage, at very senior leadership levels. I'd worked for the world's largest biotech company, and I was now working for another global pharma company, and I was a senior leader within both organizations. So
wow.
I'd done a DEI work, diversity related work as a volunteer. I'd been, you know, given that remit as part of my actual day job with both of those farm organizations as well. So I was doing a lot to drive culture change even within those organizations. So I was very well known by this stage. So everyone reached out for me, desperate for help. And specifically, it was
Mm,
around race, of course, in light of what happened with George Floyd, Sasha. So I remember panicking actually with the deluge. I had no concept of me as an entrepreneur. I'd never thought of myself as an entrepreneur running my own business. It was actually my son, who's far more entrepreneurial than I ever will be, who said, I think this is actually an opportunity, you know, business opportunity, and so on, helped me with setting up
wow.
the consultancy. I mean, he's a tech
Brilliant.
focus, you know, he's about to graduate with his computer science degree, very entrepreneurial, very okay with risk. And I mean, I don't know how. He's just very wired very differently to me. So he became one of my freelancers. He helped me with all the tech side. Everything, of course, was being delivered online. And we set up this consultancy. The model I ran was I wanted to help undergrad students who were from socioeconomically deprived backgrounds, and they were all struggling with paying rent and, you know, university studies and so on. So I had a team of four in the end, all of whom were students, including my son, and we worked really efficiently and impactfully to deliver programs to really large organizations. You know, large multinationals signed up with us, law firms were clients, built up a really solid six-figure business within a relatively short period of time with that registered, etc. And it was through that and the visibility of that that we were all approached in different ways by either by clients or those who wanted to become clients for, you know, full-time jobs. And that's how I joined Corn Ferry, where I work currently, to build up the DEI consulting practice across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And it's been a great, you know, transition because I have so much more I can offer my clients now. Being a smaller consultancy before, you know, we were developing our own IP, and there was a limit to how quickly we could do that and
Mm.
do delivery and marketing, business development, and so on. So that's how I've ended up where I am now as a partner at Corn Ferry.
That is so interesting. I mean, what was the experience like working with your son? I mean, he sounds absolutely amazing and Go him with the computer science. Brilliant. But what was it like? Because I have a son who's probably a little older than yours. He's 23, and I'm not sure how I'd handle working with him.
So it wasn't without its challenges, I have to say. I mean, we get on brilliantly, and we co-host our podcast. Actually, the podcast that we run, we do it together, and that came out of lockdown as well. We're very aware of our differences. Let's put it that way, Sasha. And you know, I'm so detail oriented. I mean, this is one of the things I find hugely frustrating about my wonderful son Max, and he truly is exceptional. And vice versa, he's equally frustrated because I'm so detail oriented. I mean, why wouldn't I be? I'm a lawyer. This is the way the training.
Exactly.
But he's very much a visionary. He will see the vision without thinking about the steps that need to be
Mm,
taken to, so you can see how that would complement and also frustrate each
mm,
other. And the other thing where we're very, very different on is planning. So his idea,
okay.
I mean, he doesn't really have a concept of planning. He's had to embrace that as he, went to university. But there are times where he just sees the vision without really thinking about the plan and deadlines and things like that. Whereas I mean, for me, if there's no plan, it's not going to happen, right?
I
So
love
we
it.
would
I
have
love it.
massive rows about all our arguments come from those two things. Every
Mm,
argument we
mm,
have. Of course, now he's
yeah.
almost 21 and it's very funny now, but certainly, my goodness, there were times when it was no laughing matter at all, Sasha.
I can imagine. I can imagine. And yet, what I hear there is just that beauty of two different types of brain, two different generations, the inter sort of complexity of the mother-son relationship, but actually creating amazing, amazing content and really changing things at a seminal time. So, what a wonderful experience! Amazing, amazing. Love it, love it. So, I now want to move to another area. I mean, time is always our enemy here, and I know that you take immense pride in your heritage, and I'm a keen follower of you on LinkedIn, and I know that that's often used as, an area of celebrating again your heritage and educating people that follow you on Nigerian culture. Can you share a little bit more about why that's so important to you?
Yes, yes. The main reason is that there is so much negativity about Nigerian Nigerians, and it's so unrepresentative of the reality of Nigeria. It's something I feel really strongly about. I was born in Nigeria. I still speak Yoruba, one of our many, many Nigerian languages, fluently, and I'm very proud of that fact. I go back home regularly. I've been twice this year already. I'm going again in November. Um,
Wonderful.
and my son, is British born, so he was born
Yep.
here. But very importantly, his father and I really wanted to expose him to Nigerian culture very early on. So he's been back to Lagos with me many, many times and loves all aspects of Nigerian culture. It's so important for identity to be very aware and proud of where you're from. And
Mm,
without that as a foundation, I've seen terrible things happen with people, because you feel all at sea, you don't have an anchor. If you can't be proud of where you're from, your heritage, it really does hamper all your efforts. You develop huge chips on your shoulder. I mean, I've seen it all. It limits your
mm.
potential ultimately. And I find that that's the thing that saddens me the most is when I see people who don't maximize their potential. So I will always talk about Nigeria, my Nigerian heritage. I like the fact that I've got dual citizenship, of course, because that's given me many privileges. I acquired my British passport over 20 years ago. But I'm still very, very proud of my Nigerian heritage, and I will never give up my Nigerian passport either. That's something that I'm very keen to keep a hold of. So yes, those are the reasons why, heritage and nationality and why it matters, really.
And our identity is, as you say, absolutely central to how we feel about ourselves, understanding more about where we come from, what the cultures, environments that we live in, and the importance to pass that on, particularly to people that maybe have a different or skewed view of difference in terms of Nigerian heritage.
Absolutely. Identity is critical. Really, really solid foundation needs to be built around that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think in a lot of ways, LinkedIn, when we create a platform and we have followers, can be a useful vehicle among other social media to, be showcasing the positives and education. Because I think so many biases that we all have as humans just come out of a lack of awareness and a hooking into stereotypes and then the reiteration of those sort of rhetorics.
Very, very true. Yes. And a sort of misunderstanding that comes from that as well. And that's why I'm such a huge fan of things like reverse mentoring, doing that
Mm,
across multiple geographies quite often, people who look nothing like each other, multiple generations. I've seen incredible things happening. I remember I paired up a senior partner of a law firm with a trainee solicitor, and the trainee was from a socioeconomically deprived background. She was black and female. She'd, gone through the Sutton Trust, and she
yeah.
really was incredible how she'd managed to get into a Russell Group University, etc. And the senior partner was white male, third generation of lawyer in his family's grandfather
Hmm.
had been a high court judge, his father was a leading barrister, so you can
Yeah.
imagine the misunderstandings that, and they'd made wrongful assumptions about each other. And so over a period of time, that then led to so many important initiatives. I mean, this is a major law firm who's now a leading light, in fact, around DEI more broadly, diversity, equity, and inclusion across the whole
Mm.
profession. But a lot of it started from this reverse mentoring pairing. So it's incredible what, lack of understanding can lead to so many terrible things, but bridging that gap can lead to wonderful work as well.
Yeah, and wonderful work, absolutely. Because what I hear there is just this ability to create a connection between two individuals whose paths would not have crossed, and then the ability to get stuff done
Yes.
through storytelling, understanding, humanizing relationships. What a great, great example of a very kind of actionable way, a tangible way that change can be affected in this space.
Yes. No.
Really important, the power of voice. And actually moving to our final area, but again, the power of voice, really, but this time through your book Climbing Mountains. I understand that this is to be published next year. One, how on earth do you find the time to write it? And two, can you share what prompted you to write the book? Any sneak sort of peeks on what we could expect?
Thank you so much. So, yes, it's been an interesting journey finding the time. I'd already written it during the various lockdowns because there was just so much more time on our hands that couldn't travel, couldn't
Yeah.
really do a great deal. But I've had to sort of amend and edit, and I'm working with an editor. So, almost going back to the drawing board in many ways. Yes, I have a strict writing schedule. It's on weekends. I've got an editor who really is very, very strict on that, and we will get it done. But the book really came out of a talk I deliver to student populations, which I've been delivering for over 10 years now, called Climbing Mountains. And it's all about my life story and then the five stages that I've gone through to get to where I am, the five top tips for success. And at the end of every talk, I'd get students coming up to me saying, "Oh, thank you so much, Miss. This has helped so much. It's so practical. Thank you for keeping
Mm.
it real. It would be wonderful if you had a book or something where you could put this down." Of course, I thought nothing of it. But when you keep hearing this constantly, and I've done talks, to universities in America and universities across the UK, and I was hearing the same thing, as well as secondary school students. And I suddenly realized that actually, if I'm going to write a book, that would be the structure of it. So, in terms
Mm.
of what the book covers, the first half is autobiographical. It covers my life and, various stages of my life across various chapters up to the current time. And then the second half of the book is those practical tips. It's the five stages to becoming a resilient leader. And I cover each of the five stages in each of the five chapters in the second half of the book. Very exciting forward messages being written. as well as we speak. We've done the photo
Ooh,
shoot for the cover and, all of that. So it's really got to happen now, Sasha.
amazing.
I have no excuse. I've got someone going to help me with the sort of typesetting because I'm self-publishing. I decided to self-publish to
Right.
maintain independence. So I've got my typesetter ready and waiting to do all the
Wow.
typesetting in December. So we have to finish the manuscript by then.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, you will. I have absolutely no doubt of that. And what I also love about this, one, I'm really looking forward to reading it. Two, it is sort of a part of your ongoing legacy. And it's just, I think, something wonderfully rewarding about being able to, publish written work that will be around when we're not around. And I think that there's something very, very powerful about that. You're leaving, a real mark and a signpost for future generations through your ability to be such an authentic and incredible role model. And I've got one last question for you, which is completely off script. But well, first of all, I'm just really enjoying listening and talking to you. And I'm just wondering what brings you joy over and above your work. You're very disciplined. You've got a path. You know where you're going. What are some of the things you do around the edges that bring you joy that maybe are are more spontaneous? I'm wondering.
So I love spending time with my son. We get on brilliantly. We enjoy each other's company. I love talking to him. He's taught me a lot. I've learned so much from him. And we regularly have mother-son dates. Going to the cinema is a big
Love
thing.
it.
In fact, we're having one next weekend. I'm going to be going up to Newcastle where he's at university. And we love the Marvel films, superhero. So
Oh
we'll
yes.
always watch that together, any Marvel film, any sci-fi. It's our thing. We'll discuss in tremendous detail afterwards, Sasha, what was good, bad about the film, etc. So that's always great fun. I really enjoy live music. I'm a massive fan of hip hop, 90s
Yeah.
hip hop specifically, and I do talk about that on LinkedIn quite regularly, actually. And it's amazing how
Love
many
it.
people from my LinkedIn network are also avid 90s hip hop fans. It always starts a
Yeah.
great conversation going. So this year I've been to 4 hip hop gigs with my son and friends and others.
Amazing.
We do enjoy Italian opera as well. So going to the other end, and it has to be Italian opera specifically. I
Okay.
don't know
Yeah.
why, but specifically Verdi and Puccini are the two composers of choice. And I've actually been to Sydney Harbour and seen La
Wow.
Boheme with my son. We watch that. We go to the Royal Opera House when we can. So we are huge fans of opera, Italian opera. Travel is a big, big part of what we do as well. I've been to lots of places. Again, traveling with my son because he's just such great company. So yes, those are sorts of things, socializing with friends, all the usual stuff as well. That's what my go-to, my happy place, as it were, outside of my work.
Wonderful, wonderful. I love that. And something which I never knew until you said what you said is that in lockdown, I sat down with my son Rory and he said, Mum, I want to talk to you about Marvel. All we've got to do is watch, I think it was 21 films or something. So I've done quite a bit of that too. So I
Fantastic.
totally hear you around the intricacies, the complexities of that entire empire. But thank you. How fascinating to hear about your life's work so far. And I'm sure so, so much more still to do. You've been an absolutely wonderful guest, and we really, really appreciate your time because this is so powerful for anyone that listens in. So
Thank
thank you
you.
so, so
Thank
much.
you, Sasha. Thanks very much indeed.
Wow, I love speaking with Funke, and there are a huge number of insights here for any leader who's looking to drive change and make meaningful progress when it comes to DEI. If you'd like to hear how Inclusive Group can help your organisation to drive change, I would love to hear from you. To find out more about our work or arrange a chat, please click on the link on the landing page of this episode and follow through to our website.